Hello and welcome to the Ruth McFit podcast. I'm very happy to be here with you today, standing up because I feel like I want to move a bit, have some more energy. And I actually have been inspired to record this episode because of something my husband was saying to me yesterday evening. He came downstairs with his phone and he was saying to me that he'd just seen a reel from the Diary of a CEO where a woman was saying that in order to protect our future brain health, we should do a sardine reset. And the reason he was sharing this with me is because he knows this is something that's of interest to me because my grandma had Alzheimer's. So I'm always interested in how we can protect our long-term health. But I'm going to be honest and say when he was telling me this, I thought that sounds like an utterly shit idea. Like the idea of eating sardines only for a few days is really quite grim, isn't it? But then it got me thinking, and it's why I'm recording this episode, because I thought about how many women are going to hear something like that and then immediately, women who are already worried about brain fog, who are already worried about aging, already stretched to capacity and already trying to do everything right. And then this episode from a huge podcast, Diary of a CEO, lands with a guest suggesting that the only way to protect your brain is to go keto and do something called a sardine reset, where you literally are going to be living off sardines for 3 days to kickstart ketosis. And I know that a lot of women will go, oh my gosh, I need to do that. I don't think I'm doing enough. Am I falling behind? Is my brain health okay? And because of this, I went online to see what other people were thinking. And it turns out a lot of people have been alarmed by that episode. There's whole Reddit threads of listeners saying that they were shocked or confused. And a lot of health professionals have also spoken up about the direction of that podcast. But this isn't coming out of nowhere because in 2024, BBC investigation looked at 15 recent episodes of A Diary of a CEO and found an average of 14 scientifically unsupported claims per episode. So there's already concern that extreme health ideas are being handed out to millions of people without context or challenge, which matters especially when the audience includes women in midlife, because we're already vulnerable to messages about aging, about cognition, Alzheimer's, longevity, keeping up and not falling behind. So when someone does come along with that really extreme, do this or your brain will suffer message, even if it's potentially well-intentioned, it hits us differently. And it's unlikely that at that point we're thinking that's an interesting concept, and more likely that we're thinking, if we don't do this, we're failing. So my plan for the episode today is to take us away from that fear-based thinking and into some fact-based thinking. So we're going to take a calm look at what the evidence actually says and what we can actually do to support our brain health as we age. So take a deep breath, step away from that panic-based nutrition, and let's explore the evidence. When we think about it, the sardine reset isn't an isolated thing, is it? It's one example of a much bigger trend in the health world right now. Extreme health advice being packaged as the answer, and that's everywhere right now. We're seeing miracle diets, hacking our hormones, 30-day fixes, eat only this challenges or don't eat this challenges, and those dramatic all or nothing claims that sound urgent and absolute. But if we're completely honest, and I'm going to include myself in this category as well to some extent, is that we just love extremes. And it's not because we are dramatic or we're desperate or we're bad with discipline, but because extremes make us feel safe, they're decisive, and it feels like we finally found the answer that we've been looking for. Like we're taking control and like change is going to be big and fast and undeniable. And there's something really intoxicating about the idea that this one thing, this diet, this hack, this reset will fix everything. And at the beginning, they give us that dopamine hit. They make us feel like we're doing something great. But you know what doesn't give us a dopamine hit, unfortunately? And that's being told that actually, if you sit in that boring middle grey area and make sustainable change over and over again consistently, you'll get the best results long term. There's nothing dramatic about adding vegetables, lifting weights twice a week, going for walks, managing our stress, looking at our sleep, eating in a balanced, nutritious way. And yet that is where the magic happens. It's just not shiny and exciting and dramatic. And it's not going to make for a very good viral clip. And I think it's a very good reason why people are drawn to things like the carnivore diet, the fruit-only diet, fasting until 4 p.m, no carbs, 5-day water fasts, and things like the sardine reset. And let's be clear here, it's not necessarily because they work. but because they're very memorable. So now that we've talked about why those extreme ideas land so strongly and why they feel so tempting, let's look at the part everyone really wants to understand, or at least I assume that's why you're here. Does keto actually support brain health? And the honest answer here is that it depends who we're talking about. There are clinical studies showing that a ketogenic diet can help people with specific medical conditions. And here we're thinking people with epilepsy, mild cognitive impairment, and Alzheimer's disease. And in those situations, some short-term trials show some modest improvements in cognition, better daily functioning, and that ketones can act as an alternative fuel source when the brain isn't using glucose well. So we're not saying that keto is useless or unscientific. It has evidence in certain medical contexts, but there is a nuance here that the public might not hear so often, because what we'll find is people cherry pick so that it supports what they want to say. And those results that I was talking about, they come from short-term studies in people already living with cognitive disease, and they have medical oversight. These are things done with the support of doctors. And there is a very low long-term adherence. And right now, the evidence does not show that every woman needs to be in ketosis to support brain health, that keto is superior to other diets for long-term cognitive aging, and definitely not, that living off sardines is going to improve your brain health. And if you're someone that loves keto and finds it sustainable, amazing, enjoy it, crack on. If you're someone who feels awful on keto and can't keep it up, that's not failure. That's actually pretty normal, and it is information you can use. You see, when researchers look at long-term population studies, the pattern that consistently supports brain health the most, year after year, again and again, is the Mediterranean diet and its very close relative, the MIND diet. It's not dramatic, it's not extreme, it's not a viral headline, but it's incredibly well supported over decades. People who eat in this way tend to show slower cognitive decline, better memory performance as they age, and lower dementia risk. Woohoo! And this pattern is built around vegetables and fruit, especially leafy green and berries, eating whole grains and beans and lentils, plenty of fiber in your diet, nuts and seeds, olive oil and healthy fats, and fish, including oily fish like sardines, but simply as one food you might have among many. And then you're thinking minimal ultra-processed foods and processed meats. So we're thinking of a diet that's rich in whole foods. I think it can be easily misinterpreted, the Mediterranean diet, because I think sometimes a lot of people think that they need to eat food that comes from the Mediterranean, but it isn't a case of we have to eat Italian food only or Greek food only, although that does sound pretty amazing. And it definitely doesn't mean that you need to start loving olives and feta overnight. And really, it isn't even a diet in the traditional sense of diet. It's just a pattern of eating and living, a lifestyle that many Mediterranean cultures naturally follow. You know, sitting down and taking time to eat together, eating slowly. It's built on meals that are centered around plants first, with protein then added. The protein doesn't dominate the plate. It is including those healthy fats that we spoke about, and things like fish a couple of times a week. But it also includes things like movement that's woven into our daily life. Here we're thinking walking, gardening, being outside, making the most of life in general. And shock horror, it also includes the more indulgent foods, things like wine, pastries, desserts. And these things are included as a less often, more enjoyable feature. They are enjoyed without guilt and without excess. So instead of restriction until you feel like I can't do this anymore, it's more about those nourishing foods with that enjoyment woven in consistently. And that is the key. So the science doesn't say that keto is bad. It says that keto may be helpful in certain medical situations. But for most people, especially women in midlife, Mediterranean style habits have a stronger long-term evidence for brain health. And it might be that one of the reasons that the Mediterranean diet does help for our long-term brain health is because it includes oily fish such as sardines, salmon, mackerel, and trout. They're a really nutrient-dense food, high in omega-3 fats, yes, but also high in protein, vitamin D, B vitamins, and minerals like iodine and selenium. And these all have a role to play in supporting brain health and energy. There are some studies that show that people who include oily fish in their diet do tend to have better cognitive health as they age. And this is probably where the focus on sardines has come from. Not because you need to eat them in an extreme way, but because they happen to be one good source of these nutrients within a balanced pattern of eating. But if someone doesn't like oily fish or doesn't eat it regularly, there are other great ways to get omega-3s. Chia seeds, I have them in my overnight oats every morning. Flax seeds, walnuts, they're plant-based options, and supplementation with omega-3 capsules is absolutely fine if fish isn't something you want to make a part of your diet. So yes, nutrition is going to play a role in supporting your brain health, but the research is very clear that brain health isn't determined only by food. How we live matters just as much, and in some areas, even more. So let's look at the big lifestyle pillars that are going to support your long-term brain function in a calm and realistic way. First, we have a big one. It's movement. Movement is one of the most powerful ways to support long-term brain health. And it doesn't need to be this big extreme thing to be effective. Even small, consistent amounts of movement have measurable benefits. For example, a 10-minute evening walk, 15 minutes of strength training twice a week, moving for 2 to 3 minutes every hour instead of sitting all day, dancing, gardening, walking more often than before. These count not because you're counting calories and you're thinking about burning calories, but because they increase blood flow to the brain and stimulate growth-supporting chemicals. I actually want to mention here one of my favorite books that I read years ago, and maybe I should reread it. It's by a lady called Kimberley Wilson, who you might remember from Bake Off years and years ago, but she's a psychologist who specializes in the gut-brain axis. And she wrote a book called How to Build a Healthy Brain. And here is a quote about movement that she popped in that book. Regular exercise is associated with greater hippocampal and overall brain volume. Exercise can, in effect, reverse brain aging. So from this, what we're taking is that enough movement doesn't mean killing yourself in the gym. It means moving more than before in ways that you can sustain over time. And actually, just in case you're interested, because this isn't covered all that often, too much exercise can backfire if it leaves you exhausted, overwhelmed, or underfueled. The sweet spot, if we're thinking about brain health, isn't maximum effort. It's regular movement that leaves you feeling energized and not depleted. But it's one of the reasons that we make it a priority to make movement feel good, to make it fun, to make it more enjoyable inside the no crap cake method. And the next area that I want to talk to you about that can help with our brain health is sleep. Sleep is absolutely vital for long-term cognitive health. When we sleep, the brain clears metabolic waste linked with cognitive decline. It consolidates memories, resets emotional balance, and large population studies show that people with long-term poor sleep, including very short or very long sleep, tend to have a higher risk of cognitive decline. And again, there's meant to be that 7 to 9 hours as the sweet spot for sleep. But if you're regularly needing 10 hours, that can be a sign that something's not quite right there as well. It doesn't, however, mean that you need to be getting a perfect sleep every single night. It just means better sleep is going to be protective. So that might look like for you starting by going to bed 10 or 15 minutes earlier to see if you can help this. It might mean dimming your lights in the evening so you're winding down to sleep. It might be leaving your phone away from the bedroom so that you're not scrolling at night. I actually have, I think it's a Philips Hue light, but it's like attached to the ceiling one. And I find this great for helping my sleep because we have it so that it dims naturally when we go to bed. And it's actually my alarm clock in the morning. So it gradually comes on through these colors. And since I've been using that, and this isn't like an ad, but since I've been using that, I find that I'm waking up feeling more alert than when I used to wake up in the dark and be like, oh, especially at this time of year. But it can also look like introducing things like a calm bedtime ritual once a week, or using blackout curtains in the summer if they help you. It absolutely definitely isn't that if you don't get 8 hours every day, then you have failed. It's just about sleep that gradually feels more restorative than before. And the next one is definitely one of the most underestimated brain health areas for women in midlife is chronic stress, especially that always being on and carrying all of that emotional load along with you. This is linked to inflammation and poorer cognitive outcomes over time. I sometimes think this is linked to the pressure that we put on ourselves to be everything to everyone. And the studies differ on how much stress matters, but the pattern is very clear. Ongoing psychological stress takes a toll on our brain. And I think we can probably guess at that. But stress reduction, again, it doesn't need to look like I'm going to go on a spa break every week. Although if that could be a prescription, I would be first to say that I will test it out and see how it helps. It's more likely to look at saying no more often than you currently are, making those choices and not reactions, blocking off one evening a week to not feel like you're on duty, doing something each evening to make tomorrow easier. These are why we include these things inside the no crap cake method, because they just make you feel calmer. And knowing that you can ask for help, you don't always need to push through. It is okay to say that you're struggling. One of my members inside the no crap cake method is using something I spoke with her about in the summer. And that is, what will it look like if I say no? And that way she can think about both outcomes and make a decision knowing that. And it might be that you start scheduling your downtime, your rest time, you time in your diary like an appointment that is non-negotiable, like it would be if it was anyone else involved. When we're thinking about supporting our brain health, it isn't just adding things in, it's often just removing a bit of that pressure. And the next one is one that can surprise people, but it might be one of the most powerful brain health behaviors we have. There's a large body of research that shows that loneliness and social isolation are associated with poor cognitive and higher dementia risks. And the main thing here is that it isn't about how many friends you have, it's about feeling connected. And I actually have realized how beneficial that is even today. So I've got a brilliant friend and she messages me and says, do you fancy a dog walk? And I always feel like I'm too busy to do that. And this morning we booked it in for early in the morning so that I could go before we started work. And it was just what I needed, to go and chat with a friend. But it doesn't need to be a big walk with a friend. It might be that you text a friend, send a funny message. It might be that you send a voice note rather than waiting for the perfect time where you can call them. It might be going for a walk with a friend, maybe once a week. It might be starting a new hobby and going to a group for this, or going to a group fitness class, or chatting to someone at the school gate or gym, or even just randomly. Sometimes those kind of little conversations you have when you're out and about and you meet someone maybe with a dog, or somebody says something to you about, I don't know, just in passing, and it just makes you feel good. And of course, I'm going to include in this being part of an online community where you feel understood, because the support that I see the women inside the No Crap Cake method giving each other is incredible. But even tiny moments of connection that are done consistently support your nervous system, and then by extension, support your brain. And our brain actually thrives on learning and adaptation. There are studies that show that adults who regularly engage in new and mentally stimulating activities tend to maintain stronger cognitive skills over time compared with those who repeat the same routines. Now, the risk here is that when we get to this stage of life, we can get into a pretty set routine where we just aren't trying new things. And when we're talking about trying new things, we're not saying that you need to learn a language or take up a PhD, but it might be that you try a new hobby. It might be that you read a different genre of book, that perhaps you learn a new instrument, or you do those puzzle or strategy games, that you say yes to an activity that previously you've been scared to do, like, I don't know, I'm going to say a zip wire or tree surfing, something like that. Or that you try a new recipe that you're not perhaps sure about, think it might be a bit beyond you, but get that satisfaction of doing it. Walking a different way to work and taking notice of what is around you. It's about learning slowly without that big pressure. And I think we could embrace that in our fitness routines as well. Often we'll put this pressure on ourselves to be so good immediately, but when we remove that pressure and we just start enjoying the experience, that beginner's mind that's called Shoshin in Buddhism, is just about having that curiosity and going in and enjoying the experience, just feeling good. Do what makes you feel good. And then we can keep our brain adapting and learning and experiencing life. So if we were to zoom out from everything that we've talked about in this episode, I think the message becomes very, very clear. You don't need extremes to support your brain. You don't need 3 days of sardines unless it's something that really excites you. It's not about cutting out whole food groups or living by rigid food timings. And actually, in that episode, there was also the message that women in midlife shouldn't eat after 10 p.m. because it would spike your insulin and be bad for your brain. And look, there are studies showing that late night eating can impact blood sugar regulation for some people, but that does not mean one late meal means that your brain is going to be impacted long term. It doesn't mean that health depends on perfect timing and restriction. And it does actually piss me off a bit because this is where fear slips in. And I don't think this is being said enough, because the fear and stress caused by these extreme health messages may actually be worse for our brain than simply living a balanced, imperfect life. Because stress drives inflammation, perfectionism triggers that shame, and food fear creates anxiety and obsession. And chronic stress is one of the strongest predictors of cognitive decline that we have. So when we're constantly trying to get it right, we might actually be doing more harm than good. And that's why we don't need to build our lives around fear to protect our brains. And the science again and again seems to point to the same thing. It's not the dramatic choices that make the biggest impact. It's the repeatable ones, the sustainable ones, the middle gray area. That's where your brain is going to thrive. We want to feel calm because everything else feels easier when we feel good. So that middle area is having mostly nutritious meals, not perfect eating, movement that fits in with your life, better sleep, not flawless sleep. It would be unfair to expect it to be perfect when hormones are changing and so on. And then reducing that pressure instead of just adding in more. And then we also want to stay connected to the people who make us feel good. And that is key, the people that make us feel good. And I highly recommend that you go and try new things, learn new things, because they make you feel alive. One of my members was out walking recently and it was kind of raining. She was on the beach and she said she just felt so alive, and actually looking at the world in that positive way makes us feel so good. So again, nothing about all of this is sensational. Nothing about this is going to go particularly viral, but everything about what we've said supports your brain long term. And the best part is that you don't need to fix it all at once. You don't need a complete reinvention by Monday. You don't need a brand new identity in order to age well. And that's where those minimums or those non-negotiables, those small habits that you build in can be really great. So it could be a 10-minute walk. It could be going to bed a little earlier, like we said. It could be texting a friend when you think of it immediately. And it might be practicing saying no just a little bit more. And no matter what your goals are, maybe you are worried about long-term health, but everything I've said here supports our health and feeling good now as well. So it's not just about our long-term health. And this is what I always try and say is make change in a way that has you heading to where you want to be. So feeling good in the future, but also feeling good now along the way, because that is possible. We shouldn't have to punish ourselves as we're making change. And we have other things that we find important, like social life, family connection, going away on holidays. And we don't want worrying about our health to take over from all of those other things that are important to us as well. So any change we make, we want it to fit with our life. So here's to caring for our brain in a way that feels calm, kind, and sustainable. Here's to more of that boring middle, thank you very much, because that is where real change is going to happen. And we all deserve to feel good right now. And I'm pretty sure that eating sardines isn't how we're going to do that. Now, I have absolutely loved talking to you about this today. And if you've enjoyed listening and you've resonated with the content of the podcast, I would love it if you could leave a comment and subscribe to the podcast or share with a friend so that they can listen too. And you can always find me on Instagram at RuthMacFit, where I love answering any questions you might have around health and fitness. Now, if you do want to delve a little bit more into the gut and brain axis, then definitely go and give Kimberley Wilson's book a read, How to Build a Healthy Brain. It's a fantastic book and great for those of you that are worried about future-proofing our mental health. And if you're looking to make some healthy changes at this stage of life, then you can find out more about coaching options at ruthmacfit.com. We'd love to see you inside the app. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.